Okay, the family's coming over, and we're gonna have a little cookout for Labor Day weekend. And I decided to make some teriyaki pork skewers, little barbecued pieces of pork with teriyaki sauce, cooked on the grill. And I'm not going to tell you that these are the best things you're ever going to have, because frankly, whenever anybody says on YouTube, this is the best recipe ever, this is the best way to cook this is the best way to do that, I don't believe it, because there's lots of different ways to do things, and there's so many good ways, and what might be the best and most flavorful for one person, another person might say, no, I don't like that. But they are very easy to make. They're very tender, they're good, and it's just something you can throw together with not a lot of effort, and it just adds to any picnic. In any case, here's how I do them. Okay, to make my barbecued pork, my honey teriyaki pork skewers, these are the basic ingredients I'm going to start with. This here is just plain black pepper. Got honey, soy sauce. This is something called mirin. It's a Japanese seasoning. It's made from corn syrup and I believe a fermented rice liquid. Ginger, a little bit of salt. Now, the soy sauce and the mirin. What I want is a teriyaki. You can buy teriyaki sauce. It comes in bottles like this. You'll find a couple different kinds of teriyaki sauce. It can be thin, like the soy sauce, or you can find it with a thicker consistency, kind of like a barbecue sauce. Now, the thicker one's good if you're grilling something and you want to brush it on like you would brush on a barbecue sauce. For marinating, you'd want to use I think you'd want to use the thinner one, the more liquidy one. I happen to be out of teriyaki, but I had mirin here for a different recipe, and I noticed on the back of the bottle it said to make teriyaki sauce, you just mix equal parts of mirin and soy sauce. So I'll be making my own teriyaki sauce. Now, if you don't have mirin and all you have is soy sauce, you can just use that. You're going to get sweetness from the honey, and that's going to give you a lot of that teriyaki flavor. So you can either have soy sauce and honey, or you can use soy sauce and mirin to make a teriyaki sauce and honey. Now, the last thing I need for the pork skewers is the pork. Normally, I would use boneless spare ribs. The boneless pork spare ribs are very tender. They'll come out not only tender, but they'll have a nice flavor to them and some moisture. These are simply boneless center cut pork chops. There is a nice marbling throughout them, so I expect them to be tender. And the reason I'm using these is, frankly, after COVID started, meat started getting expensive. And the pork they had, the spare ribs, and the boneless spare ribs were just so much money. I said, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to get boneless pork chops, and I'll marinate them overnight. Soy sauce tends to be salty. Letting meat sit in a salty solution, which is called brining, tends to make it tender and a little more juicy. So I'm going to make up the marinade and get the pork ready and let it marinate overnight. So let's get started. Okay, once again, I'm going to do my one-handed cooking technique, because until I get a camera, I have to use my cell phone. I'm going to put the marinade into this container here, because that's what I'm going to put the cut up pork in to let it sit overnight in the refrigerator. This is about 1/3 of a cup. It's a 1/3 measuring cup. I'm going to use about 1/3 cup of soy sauce. I'm not going to use as much mirin as the recipe calls for. It calls for equal parts of soy sauce and mirin to make a teriyaki. I'm going to use about half the amount of mirin because mirin is sweet and I'm going to be using honey. So I'll add enough in so that it can give it the flavor, because it is a fermented rice extract. Okay, mirin. The fermented rice will have its own unique flavor, and that'll not only sweeten the soy sauce, but give it that unique flavor that you get from teriyaki. And like I said, if you don't have mirin and all you have is soy sauce, use it with the honey. It'll be great. And remember, this is nothing gourmet. I'm not looking to show you the best way possible to cook pork or the best skewers. Everybody's going to tell you this is the best. No one's is the best. Everybody can do a decent job. There's all different kinds. This is just a tasty, easy way to make pork skewers for a picnic. Okay, now I'm going to add honey. I'm not even going to bother measuring. I'm estimating it might equal about, maybe a quarter cup. Maybe it'll be maybe it'll be closer to a third. A nice amount of honey. Honey is thick, and it will be difficult to mix it up, especially since the soy sauce and the mirin I have refrigerated. They don't have to be, but they are. And it makes the honey even thicker once it starts cooling off. So I'm going to stop the camera for a second while I mix this up. Okay, I stir that up. I used the whisk because the honey thickened up because it got cold from the soy sauce. So I'm just going to give it a little taste. It's good. It's got that nice Asian flavor. Now I will add a little bit of salt. And normally I wouldn't. Soy sauce is very salty to begin with. But I am using a lower sodium soy sauce in honey. So I'm just going to make up by adding just a little bit of salt into it. This is just freshly ground black pepper. A nice sized pinch of black pepper. And the final ingredient is I have fresh ginger here. And I'm just gonna, there, that's quite a bit of ginger, so you'll have a nice ginger flavor. And ginger does impart a bit of heat to it. But ginger plays very well with anything sweet. Ginger loves to be sweetened. There's actual candy made from pure ginger. You take ginger, you slice it, you cook it in a sugar syrup, and then let it cool off and harden up, and it's candied ginger. Delicious. And it gives you a nice bite on the tongue. Okay, that tastes good. I can taste the ginger, teriyaki, and the sweetness of the honey. It's going to be a perfect marinade. Okay, let me get this all cleared up and get the pork ready. Okay, I'm not going to use all that pork because I am going to cook up some London broil too. So I have 5 center cut boneless pork chops. There is a nice marbling throughout them. So I have hopes that they will be tender and if I cook them right, if I don't overcook them on the grill, they shouldn't come out dry or anything. One thing about pork is that when you get these like center cut pork chops, or basically just pork chops in general, you could overcook them very easily and they become dry. So let me put the phone down again while I cut them up. Okay, here's what I did. First off, that little edging of white that you saw on the pork chops, I trimmed that off. That isn't just fat, it's a bit of sinew or some kind of film, which isn't as tender as the meat. So I trimmed that off, and I took each of the pork chops and cut them into 6 rectangular pieces. And you can see that's what their original shape was. That's how I cut them. A couple of them, though, I decided to try something a little different. I just cut them into thin strips, and then when I make the skewers, I'll bunch them up and double them in on themselves and just try something a little different on the skewers. That's the pork cut up. Here's my marinade. I transferred it to a slightly smaller container. And what I'm going to do now is just arrange the pork so that it's all pushed down. There's no air spaces, little gaps between the pieces of pork, because the more of a solid layer that you can make, that little bit of marinade, as you see, fills in the gaps, and it's just enough. So at this point, it can be covered. I'll put it in the fridge, and it'll marinate overnight. Maybe tomorrow in the late morning, early afternoon, I'll take it out of the marinade if it looks like it might be getting too tender. And I'll put them on the skewers, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm starting to put the pork onto the skewers. You won't believe how I set up my phone so that it's held in place. I have a large storage tin, and I put some bananas on and wedged my phone in between the bananas so it can angle down, so you can see both my hands. Now, these bamboo skewers, you wouldn't think wood can be sharp, but when you're trying to poke this through meat and suddenly there's resistance and you're pushing and it gives and it hits you, you will impale yourself and you will bleed and it will be painful because it's not a clean cut. It's coarse wood and it will hurt. So you have to be careful. What you do is you take a piece of the meat, hold it on the sides, start on the bottom, and then twist it back and forth so it goes through. That little twisting will actually get it to cut into the meat. And you won't do what I did and learn the hard way that these things can and will impale you and be quite painful. I'm using shorter bamboo skewers, so I'm putting 3 pieces on each one. Remember I told you I had the long ones that I cut into strips? I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to poke through. So I'm just trying a few things, like I'm sticking it through, giving it a twist, putting it through, giving it a twist. I'm sorry that I'm going out of frame here. It's hard to actually look at the phone and see if I'm in shot or not.
Probably came out of this big cabinet.
What you hear in the background are my nephews and my sister-in-law who came over for a cookout. I will be putting this on the grill, in about a half an hour. And I will show you as they're cooking and after they're done. One more, and then I will turn off the camera and take a break. Okay, that's the start. I will show you as they're on the grill. Okay, these are the skewers after they're all assembled. Now, I will have to admit something I did last night, and that was I took the pork out of the marinade. I had put the marinade in around 4 o'clock or so, 3 or 4 o'clock, when I filmed myself making the marinade and putting the pork in. And I realized I wasn't going to be cooking the pork until 5 or 6 o'clock today. And I didn't want to let it marinate for a full 24 hours. So I took the pork out, drained it off, rinsed it off just a little bit. That was around 10, 11 o'clock last night. This morning, I put it back into the marinade. And this way I got a good marinade, but it wasn't a full 24 hours. In any case, next you'll see these on the grill. And this is the pork on the grill. There's really not much to it. You just grill it. It won't take long. They've only been on here a minute and you can see they're already starting to get browned. Over here I have the leftover juice. You can just take a little basting brush. Brush some of the juice on. Now remember, that pork's been marinating in this broth here. So it's okay to put this on if it's going to be cooked. But you do not want to return them back into this, nor eat anything that this comes in contact with, because this has had raw pork in it. And they're cooking up nicely. Now remember, these won't take long. 5 minutes are done. Okay, now for a quick break. Okay, and these are the finished skewers on the grill. And we have the finished plattered barbecued pork skewers. They look good, and I'll let you know afterwards how they taste. Nephew,
yeah.
Nephew Brandon.
Yes. Did an amazing job here. Got really juicy, tender in the inside.
I didn't see you take a bite yet. I know, you thought you can skip it by me.
Lots of taste to it. Did a good job.
Cool. second nephew. Sweet. Very sweet. Tasty.
Tender.
That was an honest review coming from a nephew who was
Excellent.
informed earlier that he may be in my will. Just FYI.